With nearly 5,000 specialists dedicated to supporting dealer financial services, Ally has the expertise to help you with your retail finance, F&I, and remarketing needs. We're all better off with an Ally. Contact your local Ally account executive to get started today. Ally, do it right.
Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the third week in April 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News.
And I'm Kellen Walker. We're here in New York City for the New York International Auto Show, breaking down some of the biggest stories in the auto industry from the past week and looking forward to what's in store in the days ahead. Today on the show, U.S. Senator and former auto dealer Bernie Moreno joins the show here from New York. He says this tariff scare will end up being a blip that the industry won't remember.
It's irrational for a politician or a government to get in the way of the relationship between the customer, the dealer, and the manufacturer.
That's coming up in a few minutes. But first, Jamie, how you doing?
All right, Kel, back together in New York.
Yes. Let's get into some news. So, Hyundai North America CEO Randy Parker spoke at the J.D. Power Forum on Tuesday. As tariffs cause turmoil in the market, he said the automaker's strategy is to, quote, sell like hell. He compared the challenge to other tough times in the industry like COVID-19, the chip shortage, and the CDK outage. But are these tariff challenges more unpredictable, especially with an unpredictable presidential administration?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack there, but, Hyundai's a very hard-charging company. They want to make their numbers. They want to continue to grow. We'll see what they can do. It's going to be tough if the taxes stay and costs go up for everybody. They may gain some market share, but we'll see what they can do. It is unpredictable. And, he references the challenges of other times. Of course, Swami Kotagiri this past week was, saying how what we're facing with tariffs is kind of like the global financial crisis plus the COVID and chip shortage. You've got the financial problems, the higher costs in this case of the vehicles that are going to lead to higher prices and reduce demand broadly. But there's also these, possibilities of, spot shutdowns and emergencies to keep suppliers up and running. So there's a lot of challenges there as well. So it's very challenging and unpredictable. And as you said, the policies have been changing pretty rapidly. So it's just hard to plan for.
Gotcha. And Chevrolet has not changed its sales outlook for 2025. That's even as the industry navigates uncertain federal trade and environmental policies. Brand chief Scott Bell says Chevy will leverage its agility, its experience working through other recent supply challenges. Is this a sign that some automakers believe that these trade policies and environmental policies will be temporary?
They might be hoping that they balance each other out, that taking away some of the fuel economy challenges and, EV requirements in California and the states that follow its policies would make up for the reduced demand from higher tariffs and higher prices overall. We'll see how it goes. I think it's an unrealistic expectation in many ways, but it kind of fits what we're seeing from most executives. While the analysts are lowering their outlook for the year by 1 million or more than 3 million vehicle sales just in the U.S., the executives are kind of holding the line and saying, we're not going to say the numbers are bad until actually bad numbers come in. March was good, may have been because of pull ahead demand, but they're going to cling to the fact that March was good, April appears strong, and we'll see where the year goes from there.
And finally, Jamie, we've been here at the New York Auto Show this week. What has stood out to you most, and what were your big takeaways?
It was a pretty good show. A lot of people were saying, at least the first, several hours, the first few hours, the morning of the first day felt like an auto show, like an old school auto show. Big crowds, hard to get around, a little bit of glitz and excitement. I think it was interesting to me to see the variety of vehicles that were unveiled. We saw EVs and gas cars, hybrids and concept cars. So, for several years there, every show would be all EVs. And now we're seeing a lot more variety, a lot more diversity of the offerings.
Good stuff, Jamie. Coming up, U.S. Senator Bernie Moreno joins the program to talk about his career as an auto retailer and his priorities as a new lawmaker in Washington. That's next on Weekend Drive.
For over 100 years, Ally has helped dealers like you serve your customers by providing the best-in-class products and services you need. and by remaining true to the automotive passion we share. Your dedicated Ally account executive will work hand in hand with you to help you gain efficiencies, increase your product offerings, and work to improve per vehicle revenue. Because we care about your business as much as you do. We're all better off with an Ally. Contact your local Ally account executive to get started today. Ally, do it right.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. Dire tariff-driven projections from economists and other industry experts are unlikely to play out. That's according to Senator Bernie Moreno, a Republican from Ohio and a former car dealer. Moreno provided his perspective at the Auto Forum New York, hosted by J.D. Power, NADA, and the New York International Auto Show on April 15th. After the event, he spoke with our own Molly Boygon about the remarks. Here's their conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Boygon. I'm with Automotive News. I'm here with Senator Bernie Moreno. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Of course, loyal Automotive News reader for about 40 years. I
We
just aged
appreciate
myself,
it.
by the way.
Wow, yes, that is a long time. And I've been there for all 40. So, yes, thank you for taking the time. You just came off the stage here at New York Auto Forum. And obviously, you were talking about tariffs, which is something that's been on the agenda all day long. What is the timeline that you see for the tariffs?
Well, it's up to the other countries. So the other countries, especially Canada and Mexico, are on the fentanyl tariff. They've got to prove to the President of the United States that they're going to absolutely crack down on fentanyl coming across our border. You see it in Michigan, Ohio, the northern states, where fentanyl is pouring across our border. We don't know how much is pouring across. The Canadians will say, well, it's very little. We don't know by definition because it's illegal. It's not like they tell us when they check in, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm bringing in this much illegal fentanyl. So they got to crack down on that. And then the other countries, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, the EU, they've got to come to a table with a fair and reasonable offer so that we can have fair and reciprocal trade.
And in terms of the tariffs that are aiming to reshore domestic manufacturing, are those permanent since they're used less as a bargaining chip for trade deals with the U.S. and more to bring that manufacturing back to the country?
Look, President Trump's going to ultimately make that decision. If you're asking what I would recommend, if he asked me, is probably some sort of baseline permanent tariff like we have now, by the way, like we had. For example, on foreign cars, it was 2.5%. I think that number clearly is too low because we have to make certain that we protect critical industries, cars, steel, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and energy. So I think that number will probably settle in around, if I was thinking about it, somewhere around 10% as a permanent number, as long as other countries didn't have their tariffs higher than that or non-tariff barriers higher than that. And I think that's probably where it lands, but ultimately we have the master negotiator in the White House that's going to make that happen. Another
thing that's come up today is the tension between the pressure on automakers to develop electric vehicles and sell electric vehicles, which has not gone according to plan, and the
that's the understatement, by the way,
and the
$7,500 subsidies per car, and massive money spent on battery factories. And New York, which you think would have a higher number, hit 7% last year, and by law, it's hit 35% next year.
Yes, and so automakers are dealing with that, dealers are dealing with that, and also, automakers in particular are looking at the global landscape and thinking that they have to be prepared, as other regions like China and the EU are developing EVs and EV adoption is growing. So how would you address that tension?
Well, America's always been the leader. So I think when we get to a point of total normalcy and common sense, which is let the market dictate the pace of innovation, have aspirational yet technologically achievable standards, set those standards for 10 years. That's a commercial for my bill, by the way, called the Transportation Freedom Act. And if we pass laws like that, car companies can make the cars consumers want, lower the price of automobiles so that they're not subsidizing electric vehicles at the cost of the cars consumers actually want. It's irrational for a politician or a government to get in the way of the relationship between the customer, the dealer, and the manufacturer. And that will help the industry tremendously. And I think when America does that, the rest of the Western world will follow. And honestly, the only ones that are all in on electric vehicle technology is China. They've way overbuilt factories to provide for the whole world. They're not a consumer market. They're an export market. And I think we can isolate them on EVs. It's not the powertrain of the future. We don't know what the powertrain of the future is going to be. The market will dictate that.
What role do you think the automotive industry has in fighting climate change?
Look, the reality is what happens in the climate is that you see changes all the time, and you have polluters like China and India that are responsible for the vast majority of the pollution in the world. So we have made cars dramatically better. In fact, the best way to combat climate change is to make the fleet of your vehicles newer. So if you go from a 14-year-old fleet to a 6-year-old average fleet, the environment is dramatically improved. So how do we do that? We make cars more affordable. And that means making cars that customers want and not subsidizing or putting burdensome regulations on the cars that people don't want. Because what's happening is the fleets are older. And that fleet getting older is worse for the environment, not better.
In your bill, there's a couple of parts dedicated to the California waiver, and that's been a focus of the administration and this whole Congressional Review Act back and forth. I wonder what you think about, in covering this issue, people occasionally say, isn't this sort of a states' rights issue? You have California, which has trademark smog as a result of its geography and other factors, and it's been granted this right to create the emissions regulations. How would you respond to that?
California can be as irrational and as idiotic as they want to be, as long as it doesn't affect interstate commerce. But the sole purpose from our founders for a federal government was to regulate interstate commerce, regulate for a common defense and a common currency. That was the founding principles of this country. So one of those three legs is interstate commerce. You cannot expect a car company to make cars for 49 states and one for California. It's even gotten worse because now it's 19 states and 31. So you can't do that. You need to have one standard for the whole country. It's what every other nation on earth does, and we cannot allow climate lunatics in California and Sacramento to dictate the kinds of cars Ohioans want to buy. It's wrong. It's against our constitutional principles, and we're going to fix it whether through my bill or through a Congressional Review Act, which hopefully we get done next month. And
just on the Congressional Review Act, do you plan then to defy the decision of the Senate parliamentarian earlier in the month about how the CRA is not eligible for revoking the rules under the waiver?
The Congressional Review Act is crystal clear. That is the decision of the United States Senate as to whether they vote yes or no to remove a regulation. The GAO lawyers, probably some left-wing lunatic lawyers that were in the GAO, issued a legally incorrect opinion. And so we are going to take the right decision. Ultimately, I was elected. My 99 other colleagues were elected by the people of the United States of America. We have the sole responsibility to decide whether a rule fits under the Congressional Review Act and to follow it. We were the elected people. We're going to do that. We're going to do our job.
So you will defy the Senate parliamentarian?
It wasn't even something that should have gone to the parliamentarian. I don't think it's not in the law. It's crystal clear. When you take pen to paper, you either write a law or you write a rule. There's nothing in between. There's no, this is an issue that was about one person. That's typically what you're talking about, is if this is a non-rule, it affects you. What the California does, it affects the entirety of the millions of people who live in California, plus 18 other states. So it's our job to make certain that we interpret it that way and that we make the right decision to repeal that, especially around semis and tractor-trailer trucks, which California wants to ban diesel ones and have it be electric, which is totally and completely insane and irrational. I can't deal with irrational policymakers in Sacramento when it affects the entire country. So we need to regain federal authority on that. We're going to repeal those regulations through the Congressional Review Act. We will get that done. And then my bill matters because it's about permanency, so that you look at that and say, this is what happens for the next 10 years. So when the Democrats take back over at some point, hopefully it's rational Democrats, but we're planning for irrational Democrats. They can't then reverse course easily.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That's all for this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on tariffs, retail, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back on Monday for a conversation with Vinay Shahani, Nissan America's Senior Vice President of U.S. Marketing and Sales.
In this environment, I think we all have to be very nimble, and Nissan is proving that we can do that.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. If you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.